Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for your time. Appreciate we're competing a bit against the weather. Hi, everybody, and welcome to Pepro Live. I appreciate your time today, especially as rather unseasonably we're also competing against the weather. So hopefully some of you are taking this session in your gardens and enjoying a bit of the sun. I'm Matt Jackson, Head of Partner Development at Pepro. As you can see from the backgrounds, we're still all working from home, so please be aware that kids, dogs, cats, we may get some unexpected interruptions. Just be aware of that. In a week when a large ship running aground has caused $10 billion worth of goods to be blocked every single day, we're again reminded of the effect the macro level geopolitical, technological and social influences have on merchants and ultimately end consumers. We're going to discuss the impact that Brexit has had on cross-border trade. I'm joined today by James Booth from Pepro and Kieran O'Malley from Trustee. Kieran, James, welcome. Kieran, maybe if you can give us a little bit about Trustee and about yourself.
Brilliant. Thanks, Matt. Firstly, it's great to be here with Pepro. Really excited for this session today. So my name is Kieran O'Malley. I'm the VP of partnerships at Trustee. So I look after all the PSPs, the acquirers, and of course work closely with Pepro. For those of you who aren't aware of Trustee, we are one of the largest online banking payment providers. We grew out of the Nordics and now we're expanding rapidly across Europe and into the US as well. So we service about 8,000 merchants. There are 510 of us in offices across the globe. And we're looking forward to really changing the face of debit payments going forward.
Thanks, Kieran. Looking forward to some of your insights. James, maybe a few words about yourself and introduce Pepro for those that aren't too aware of us.
Perfect. Thank you, Matt, and great to have you on board, Kieran, for this discussion. So my name's James. I'm the Head of Partnerships for Europe, Middle East and Africa at Pepro. So effectively, myself and my team look after all of our client relationships within the region. So all of our PSP acquiring partners, gateway partners, etc. for the region, and we look to resell those solutions in the market. Kieran and the Trustee team being one of our key suppliers and key partnerships that we have in the region. For those of you that don't know, Pepro, we are effectively an infrastructure provider for local payment methods globally. So we don't work with merchants directly. We consult with them, and we mainly service our solution through our network, our distribution network of PSPs, acquirers, gateways, and global banking providers. So today, obviously, the discussion is very relevant for us, as well as Trustee, and very looking forward to spending 20-25 minutes with the both of you.
Thanks, James. I always like to use my family as a bit of a gauge as to how impactful something has been. And I think if I ask anyone in my family, my wife or maybe my mother, the impacts that they feel are perhaps some delayed delivery or some custom charges. James, maybe a few comments on other impacts we've seen and really the scale of those impacts that we see Brexit has caused initially.
Yeah, I mean, I think you started off on a good point there. The main focus that we've seen, at least in the e-commerce environment, has been increased tax, delays from shipping providers, troubles at the border. We've always seen the news on Sky News and BBC regarding all of the tracks backed up on the highway on the way to Dover. That's really been kind of in focus for a lot of the providers out there, and I think that's where a lot of the pain has been. However, there's a lot of, let's say, undercover pains and undercover challenges that I feel the whole ecosystem has faced. And that's actually more where we'll focus on this discussion. And it's more around the payment flows, new payment mixes coming into the scheme, the changes of consumer behaviors, I think is a big thing that's actually been driven out of the pandemic, which completely dovetails into, let's say, a Brexit discussion here. And it's those types of factors that I believe where most of the, let's say, the fintech frustration or the payments frustration has come from, is navigating the new forms of payments, the new channels, the new banking relationships that need to be set up, new licensing requirements, etc., and how merchants navigate all of this in an increasingly complex landscape.
Brilliant. So, Kieran, from the payment method point of view, what steps did Trustee take in preparation, and what impacts have they seen, and how are you having to react to those now?
Sure, it's a really interesting one. So from our perspective, clearly working across Europe and the UK, we had a pretty quick legal entity challenge that we had to make sure that we could service the right entities in the right places. Our teams dealt with that nice and swiftly, and I wouldn't say it was a painless process, but it was a process that we got through. So we were always able then to service our partners and merchants. I think the biggest challenge from a payments perspective that we saw was the challenge clearly of our merchants, and them suddenly having to think about, actually, how do I process card payments? Where are my transactions coming from? And what alternatives do I need? Clearly on the alternative payment side and the local payment methods, the UK hasn't been a huge market for that, but it's clearly a strong growth market. And I think Brexit and similar challenges are really pushing that. I'm sure we'll discuss that a bit more today as well. But also for those selling cross-border, they've acquired customers in Europe, they really need to make sure now that they have the right payment methods, and can they still accept those? It's always worth remembering in Europe, about 48% of customers prefer to pay with something that isn't a card. So if you can't service that, then your business is not, I wouldn't say fully at risk, but you're going to be liable to competition from providers that can service customers how they want. So from our side, there was clearly friction from a legal perspective, that we got through that very quickly, and now it's more about solving the friction for our merchants.
Yeah, but do you think it's maybe a good thing that's happened there to a degree? Because pre-Brexit times, I think merchants were just accustomed to doing things a certain way, and they were happy with the status quo, and they were happy with how the flows were occurring between the UK and Europe. Obviously, payment preferences in Europe, they differ from country to country, and it's completely different to the UK. So it's almost raised this question about how do you service consumers correctly, and do European merchants actually have the right payment mix for UK consumers, and likewise. It's raised a very interesting question, and now is a perfect time to tackle it, especially considering all of the consumer preferences and actually the way that we're interacting with digital payments today.
Yeah, and I think
sorry, Kieran, after you.
No, go ahead, Matt, after you.
I think we got that perfect storm, didn't we, where Brexit came along and COVID sort of came at a parallel time, and that forced a lot more people online. So an effect that we may have seen from Brexit was exacerbated by the COVID situation, and heaps more people coming online.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that at all. And I think if we dive down into the UK particularly, it has been a very card orientated market. Clearly there have been a lot of pressures towards the cost of cards, and all of a sudden with some of the sort of announced changes in terms of interchange and the like, it really shines a light on, okay, how can we broaden this payment mix? Ironically, in some ways we're moving away from Europe, but in other ways we're learning from Europe and having different local methods. So yeah, that really has accelerated the conversation, as well as the fact that we are all paying off of our phones in these sort of omni-channel experiences, which we call the pubs. And when they reopen, it's a real change in our way of paying. So now is the perfect time for a local payment method really to grow in the UK.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great stuff. Thank you. Another aspect that we've seen is that some companies are refusing to accept SEPA payments or direct debit setups from GB IBANs. This is actually in breach of the EPC SEPA governing regulations. What has Trustee done in reaction to this, Kieran?
Yeah, it's a really good point. And look, cross-border payments are challenging. They're challenging how they're set up correctly, but they're also challenging because they're complex and uncertainty. we take quite a clear view of this. We process things locally. Let's not deal with these cross-border challenges. Let's set up locally so that when a merchant or a partner plugs into us, they just get that local experience. So if a customer's paying in Sweden, or if they're paying in London, or if they're paying in Poland, they're making a local payment to a local Trustee account, and then we deal with all of the complexity behind it. Because as you say, it's hard enough with the sort of stated complexity, let alone activities like this, which, you know, perhaps through confusion or not quite sure what, are creating additional barriers to cross-border payments.
Great, James. And is there anything that the market can learn from that approach, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think overall there's a lot to learn from the market in general. I mean, I think it's I don't want to get into a wormhole here, because we can probably speak for hours, but I certainly think there's a lot that the market can learn from that. I think it's a wise approach. We've seen it being replicated actually globally. Obviously, Pepro's footprint is global. We're working in APAC as well as in Latin America, and it's a similar approach that I think you have to take when you're looking at payments globally, especially in a cross-border context. So it really it's a similar situation here between the UK and Europe, and ensuring that you're always processing locally. It's kind of table stakes at this point in time, I think.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so another thing we saw, and initially I believe it was Mastercard who moved to increase fees for UK online card purchases. I think I've seen Visa follow suit recently. So what does this mean, James, for PSPs and merchants? Maybe is there a play for local payment methods? And then Kieran, we'll come to you and discuss Trustee's view of the market.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously it was a move that Mastercard were quite quick to make. Visa followed suit. Obviously, in pre-Brexit days, they had the interchange cap, and they were limited to that cap. So it was inevitable that they were going to deviate from that cap after Brexit. I mean, ultimately, merchants are going to initially pay for this, and indirectly consumers at some point in time. I think I read initially the Mastercard hike is estimated to cost European merchants an extra, I think it's about 16.5 or 14.2 million pounds a year. With businesses like Germany and Italy hit the hardest. I think the interesting part there is you have merchants that are based in a country that are already used to local alternative payment methods. They're already using bank transfers. You have a consumer base that's already used to that. And now you have a new market where potentially some of these rails are cheaper, more cost effective and preferred solutions, mixed with a consumer base in the UK that is more, that's more open to new forms of payment coming out of the pandemic. I mean, we know that consumer preference changed, especially in the UK. I know digital payments is kind of the standard here. I exclusively use my mobile phone to pay anywhere in the UK right now. So I'm open to different forms of payment, and that mixed with merchants who are already used to these different flows actually opens the space wide open for merchants to capitalize on these new rails and actually make it ultimately more competitive and a better solution for consumers at the end of the day.
Yeah, really good point. And again, the family test comes in that you know, I took a phone call from my mum asking how to pay for something online, which is as frustrating as it was interesting. Kieran, what's Trustee's view on that situation, and how have you reacted?
Yeah, it's almost a perfect storm at the moment. You know, we work a lot actually with the British Retail Consortium as well, and they've had an ongoing campaign against really merchants and actually acquirers not being able to control their costs through rising scheme fees. And then to add on top interchange increases, which seem even more, they're clearly stated and there's a clear logic behind it to some extent, but from a merchant's perspective, they just see their costs have gone up. The person that they're talking to, the acquirer, they can't do anything about it, right? It's not exactly as though there's huge margins in acquiring today. And so that really drives this, okay, what else out there? And if we'd gone back 5 years, they would have looked at what else out there, and they would have seen alternatives based on cards, and they wouldn't have really had a choice. Whereas now, I think, you know, my macro view of payments is that payments are moving into a space, particularly debit payments, where a proof of ID, a fingerprint, a face ID should be all we need, plus having the money in our account, of course, to be able to actually make a payment. And it's just it's great to see this kind of ecosystem that has developed in the UK, and we've been part of open banking since 2016, that now delivers that experience. So merchants actually have an alternative. They can look at an open banking provider like Trustee and have debit payments which are instantly settling, and the consumer is fingerprinting with their bank app. And I think just a key point on this about general digitalization is that we all have banking apps now. If you go into any of the app stores, look at the top of the list. There are the large bank apps already installed. So you're not asking customers to change behavior. You're not asking them to download and register for something. They have it sitting on their phone already. So from our perspective, the UK is now really ripe for growth in open banking.
Yeah, and I also think from a timing perspective, the timing is quite good in that degree, because if Brexit actually happened against its original time frame, I think open banking wasn't that mature at that point in time. The flows were not that good. I think consumer confidence in some of these redirect flows that UK consumers are used to now would have been more difficult for consumers to adopt this several years ago. However, AISP services have been around for a while. They're very stable. Consumers have interacted with these flows for quite a while. So now inserting a payment flow using the same redirect flow and debiting straight out of your bank account is something that consumers are used to. Obviously, we in payments, we're very used to these flows, but I've spoken to a few of my friends and even they are used to these flows and they recognize them. So it's definitely becoming more mainstream.
Yeah, and just on this, it was something we pushed, so I probably shouldn't say this, but I was on a flight from Edinburgh back to London after an open banking event, and Imran, who has run open banking extremely well, just happened, and I'm sure this wasn't the best coincidence for him, but he just happened to be sitting next to me on the flight. So an early morning flight from Edinburgh, where he wanted probably to get some rest. He's an extremely busy man. He had me in his ear for 45 minutes. And that discussion ended up as being, look, we can get to a place, the open banking APIs, this is 2.5, 3 years ago, they're not there yet. But if we get to a place where a consumer can fingerprint or they can face ID to confirm a payment in their banking app, there is no need to simplify beyond there. We are at the perfect debit confirmed payment method. And it's just nice to see that in the last sort of, I would say really from September, maybe earlier actually, August last year, that just slowly but surely the APIs got more reliable, they got better user experiences, and now we're seeing adoption off the back of that. So yeah, you're quite right, James. If this had happened 2-3 years ago, there just wouldn't have been an alternative.
There wouldn't have been an alternative. And from the timing perspective, you also have a rush of merchants rushing to go online over the summer in 2020. So it completely coincides with September, October, November last year in having good user experiences. So the stars have seemed to align on this one, and it's going to be very interesting to see how this accelerates further in the next year or two.
Really, really insightful. Thank you. So I think what we're saying is that there's this influx of people coming online, and I think the stat around 80% of shoppers in the 3 largest EU markets, being France, Germany, and the UK, make at least half their purchases online. Loads of people have come online. They are now more open to different user experiences than perhaps using a card. But there's complexities in dealing with these cross-border payments. What would your advice be, Kieran, for businesses to do now so that they can capitalize on this opportunity that's happened?
It's a really interesting one. And if you look at it from one perspective, you're in a situation where, although customers have come online, this has got harder. I mean, it just has got harder. So my advice would be try and eliminate uncertainty where you can. So uncertainty is this sort of unknown disruptor. It's something that you may be able to have a good process, but if the customer's uncertain, it doesn't matter. They'll just abandon. So how do you actually remove uncertainty? I would say on the purchasing side, British retailers are quite, should we say, haven't been too proactive in translating their websites. Make sure that the customer can see it in their local language. They're not seeing instructions Google translated. Google Translate is great, but it's not necessarily what you want. And then you need to make sure that they've got the right currency, so they can say, okay, I can pay in euros, I can pay in zloty, whatever it might be. once you've got that, you've got comfort, you've removed some uncertainty, and then clearly providing the payment methods that they use for a local shop, it just makes it feel like this experience is localized to them. And again, this is somewhere where UK merchants really haven't been that great. I think there's some stats saying only 12% of UK payment merchants offer alternative payment methods. So there's a lot we can do there. And then the other big area of uncertainty that we need to tackle is returns policy. Now, clearly, there is no way a payment method can solve the problems around the channel tunnel, right? But there are things that can be done. And I think clear policies and being able to provide instant refunds. So that may be something like a refund receiving the goods. I know a lot of merchants are doing that for particularly important customers, or using a provider. At Trustee, we offer instant refunds so that the customer doesn't have 5-6 days where the money is kind of in the air for them. I think that's real important. So you eliminate the uncertainty on the purchase experience, eliminate the uncertainty on the refund experience, and then you're going to get customer loyalty if you have a good product, of course.
And I think as often we get in these conversations is the consumer's got to be at the heart of everything, right? And so everything you've spoken about there, eliminating the uncertainty, immediate refunds, are all with the consumer at the heart. James, any further comment on that? And then we'll jump to some questions. I've seen loads of questions coming in, so thank you for that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's very difficult to follow up on what Kieran said, because I think you covered all the major topics. It really comes down to confidence and transparency around these processes. So if you can build confidence with your consumers, if you can have transparency around all of your processes, such as refunds, such as delivery times, and you can deliver against those promises, then you're in a very strong position. And then, as Kieran said, you just need a good product.
Actually, Matt, to one final point on this. Clearly, we're talking about a customer perspective, but actually, the merchant, there's the high level benefit of building your business, etc. But particularly on the refund side, like we've just recently done a survey of, I think we're over 100 European merchants, and 27% of their support calls were, "Where is my refund?" Right, which has a direct cost impact on them. So it's really quite striking. And then we also asked consumers. We asked 10,000 consumers about, okay, when would you phone a merchant? And generally within about 6 days, 87% would actually phone a merchant asking for this. So eliminating uncertainty does have an impact on the bottom line for the merchant as well, which is, I don't think we should overlook that.
No,
I'm not surprised by that. I'm surprised that consumers will wait 6 days sometimes for a refund, considering the majority of the time you get almost instant refunds and instant bank transfers. We're moving towards an instant payment world, so that should be the ultimate goal for everyone.
Brilliant. We've had lots of questions coming in, so thank you for those. I don't think, looking at the clock, that we're going to have enough time to get to all of them. We will follow up with everyone outside of this if we don't get to your question. So please, if you have anything you'd like to know, either email sales@Pepro or drop the question into the chat here. So the first question coming in from Habiba, I hope I pronounced your name right. Is it equally challenging for British merchants as it is for European in terms of business in general? Maybe James, you take that one to start with.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it depends on the context and where the merchant's based. Are they doing cross-border? Are they doing local? I mean, yes, I think the short answer is it's just as challenging. You have the same factors. Obviously, if you're doing cross-border trade, now it is more challenging against some of the topics we've discussed, such as shipping, such as payments, such as tax, etc. But I think in today's age, we're globalizing very quickly. Merchants in Europe should be able to do trade within the UK. They should be able to do trade within North America, for example, or China, etc. And I think that's what we need to work towards. So I don't think there's a big difference between the UK and Europe. It's just now that the UK's left, it's more of a global discussion and a global mindset around these flows.
Kieran, any comments on that?
Yeah, the only thing I would add on top of that is clearly, the Europeans do have, to some extent, an advantage of finding replacement markets, which is going to be harder for Brits. And we look at shellfish in the UK, for example, is a hot topic. the fact that if we're not exporting it, actually Brits need to start eating a few more prawns to soak up demand there. So I think that is a bit of a challenge, whereas some European merchants can maybe pivot to other European markets.
Brilliant, thank you. Another question from Arthur. Kieran, do you think open banking will replace the cards in the UK? Obviously not fully, but a great percentage of all debit payments?
It's a really, really hard question to forecast. I think it has the potential to. I don't believe in general that a single payment method will solve all situations. But I think that for the needs of customers when they're making a debit payment, there is no better user experience than with open banking and the service that we provide on top of Trustee. I think that merchants have a strong incentive to offer it, but changing customer behavior is more than just offering a product. And that's why we are investing quite a bit in awareness campaigns and sponsoring football clubs and the like of that, so that customers can really see things. Because cards, from a customer perspective, they work okay, and they're used to it, and they're used to the frictions. We need to educate them about shifting across. So I do believe that the open banking, and I believe Trustee will be a big part of that, will take a significant share from cards. But I don't think that cards will disappear.
Yeah, I agree.
My view on that is that you've got to offer that great consumer experience, and I think maybe Trustee do that now, but I, as a UK consumer, are probably not too aware of it. So I think you've got to bring the merchants online as well as bringing the consumers online, and it's a really difficult thing to do, is serve those two different user cases sequentially. James, any comments on that? We've lost Kieran behind the next question. Right, Kieran, maybe pop your head up.
No, I completely agree. I completely agree with what Kieran said. I don't think cards are completely going away. However, I think there is a very good opportunity here to open up the landscape and to diversify the UK payments landscape, which I do think is needed. I think there are some really interesting and really good use cases for bank transfer flows, even e-wallet flows. There's a lot of different use cases, and I think the more optionality we have, the better it is for everyone. And I think we're going through the shift now, and over the next 5 years, I think we'll be in a very different landscape. It won't be a Visa-dominated world out there, but we'll be well on our way over the next few years. It'll take a decade or two, don't get me wrong, but I think we're on that journey now.
Brilliant. A question coming from Alexandra. Mastercard's imposed a 5-fold increase on credit card interchange fees charged for UK online purchases from the EU, following Britain's withdrawal from the European Union. How do you comment on the development of the interchange fee situation in the UK versus Europe in the short to long term? How could this be mitigated for merchants? Thanks for that question, Alexandra, and apologies that we've hidden Kieran's face again. Kieran, to you, now that we've got you back.
Yeah. So I think, look, I don't think we're going to see interchange moving. Well, I think cross-border interchange is here to stay at the current levels. I do understand that there are some discussions, or some people believe that local UK market interchange may also move off the current cap rates. I don't think that's been confirmed either way. I think we need to think beyond interchange. Merchants often think of interchange as the card cost. It's not, right? You've got scheme fees on top, and we see across Europe scheme fees increasing significantly. We commissioned some research with PSC Consulting, and they found around a shift from about 0.05% up to 0.2% and above now in the UK. So actually, interchange is becoming almost a smaller part of the cost, unless Visa or Mastercard decide to change the domestic. So you got to think about card costs in general, and you've got to realise that is increasing. It's on an upward path, and we don't see any reason why that would change.
Yeah.
So don't just consider the interchange, consider the total cost of that transaction, and that will probably have other fees on top of that as well, depending on who you partner with. James, any comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's exactly that. Consider the entire cost. I mean, I think also consider the overall conversion rates that you see with some of these methods. Look at diversifying your portfolio out and really consider the whole picture to make sure you have the best solution possible.
cost plus conversion rate, of course. Yeah, brilliant. I want to respect everybody's time, but I really like a question that's coming from Mario. So maybe just one more. Do you think the shift in behaviour and adoption of different payment methods could lead to an increase in online fraud in the UK? Fascinating topic. Again, we could probably do another half an hour on that. James, maybe a short comment.
Yeah. I mean, I think inevitable, the more transactions that move from an offline context to an online context will increase the, let's say, the number of fraud. But I think from a percentage perspective, I think it's one of the challenges that the entire industry is tackling right now. I think there's some fantastic solutions out there that tackle that. So, in this early phase, we might see 1 or 2 cases that will increase, but I think long term, I don't see fraud increasing, just because of the strength of some of the flows, the strength of verifications. You're doing payments straight out of your bank account, for example, in a Trustee or online banking context. Very difficult to get into somebody else's bank account and do fraudulent transactions. There are things like phishing out there, and there's those types of topics that we need to tackle. And I think as our solutions become more sophisticated and we get more involved in digital payments, will we solve for these channels? So the answer is yes and no. It's a bit of a difficult one, but I think there will be initial increase because as more volume flows through, we'll get more. But I think as an industry, we'll tackle the overall percentage of fraud, and we'll keep that under control.
Kieran, perhaps I'm serving you up an opportunity to pitch Trustee here, but how much of managing fraud and security is at the design of your UX, and how big a part has that played in the development of your products?
Yeah, it is pretty fundamental. If you think about, what do we want from a payment? We want a payment to prove that the person owns the account and can transfer the funds. And if you make a payment with Trustee, in effect, what you're doing is you're verifying in a way that can't be replicated by anyone else with a fingerprint or a Face ID to make that payment. So all of the fraud based on someone stealing your card details, on someone stealing your cash even, right? These types of events, these dissipate. Now there are still, and that is a key reason why merchants choose Trustee. It's some of our clients in the Nordics, they actually put Trustee flows through a different engine than they do for their traditional. So they add an additional fraud engine on top of any card or e-wallet payments. For Trustee, they're straight through processed because they know they've gone through 2-factor authentication. I think there are other aspects of fraud, and the fraud world is changing from people using someone else's details as Trustees and solutions like that grow into merchant-based fraud. And how do we solve that? And I think 2 points on that. The first is that providers are regulated, and it's really up to the industry to KYC and understand our merchants well. And that's something Trustee invests a lot in, and we work with partners who do that as well. I think the other kind of key area here is that people, particularly in the UK, associate online payments and online bank transfer with just sending a bank transfer from their bank without using someone like Trustee. And that is a bit of a challenge, right? Because you're sending your funds to hopefully the right account. And so we believe that as services like Trustee become more frequently used and regulated services to make payments, that authorized push payment fraud will then decrease significantly. Because with Trustee, that the merchant on the other side has gone through a KYC process, either with us or through one of our partners. If you're just sending a bank transfer to someone, you haven't had that process. So I think, look, 2-factor authentication will reduce it on the customer side, and the industry can reduce it on the merchant side.
Brilliant. Gents, really enjoyed the chat. We've gone over time, as I think we all could have predicted. So I want to be wary of everybody's time and calendars today, especially given that we've actually got some good weather. It just leaves me to thank you both for your contributions today, and also everybody who's joined the live. There's lots of questions we didn't get to. We will respond to those. If you think of anything else or want to get in touch with any of us, you can find us all on LinkedIn. Outside of that, please email sales@Pepro, and then we'll respond to you. Thank you both.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Matt.
Take
It's been
care.
very enjoyable.
Have a good day.